Kristi, where are you broadcasting in from?
Oh, I'm zooming in from my apartment in not so sunny northern London.
Okay. And what do you do in North London for those who haven't met you before?
Oh, well, I'm based at a theological college here, so I kind of do a little bit of teaching and philosophy and evangelism and stuff. And then I'm in the last year, hopefully the last year of my doctoral studies alongside that. Plus, they kindly released me to, do some little bit, just a fraction of what you're doing, sharing Jesus on campuses and training events and stuff like that.
Let's get on with the conversation
about the meaning crisis, because the last time, in fact, it wasn't the last time I saw you, because I saw you at an evangelism conference about C.S. Lewis and evangelism at All Souls. That was fascinating. We might talk about that in a second. The time before that I saw you was a little over a month ago. We were at Oak Hill Theological College in North London, and we were talking about church and the meaning crisis, because we had an event with you and Tom Holland and Paul Vanderklay. Now, Paul Vanderklay is an interesting YouTuber, a Christian pastor in California, and he speaks about the meaning crisis as this moment in which, if everything is mechanics, then who am I anymore? If there's no God, if I'm just a biological survival machine, then here I am. I'm just matter in motion. And no wonder people are struggling to figure out what they're doing on planet Earth. They don't have a story that kind of orients them. And so we might have the latest iPhone, but we have a meaning crisis. Now, I think that phrase, the meaning crisis, was new to you as a way of describing the age that we're in. But it's something that you think about quite a lot, isn't it, Kristi? The meaning crisis?
Boy, do I, Glen. Yeah, I do. It's such a huge kind of topic, really, particularly now as well. I think we're starting to see more of the cost of the lack of meaning in our lives and in society as a whole. And that whole thing, about nature just abhors a vacuum, doesn't it? So, the minute you kind of take out things like meaning and purpose and significance and value, everything else just kind of is shoved in to try and fill that space in some way. And so, yeah, I think what we're living in right now is both a challenge, but it's also a moment of great opportunity, I think, for us. Should I keep rambling? I can keep going.
Like what are the opportunities? Because I think it's very common for us to just think, oh dear, we've lost everybody. They've all become atheists and they're all just kind of floating off into the ether, and we've lost them forever. Are you seeing ways that we can grasp this as an opportunity to speak into the moment?
Oh my goodness, there are so many ways in which we can do this. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we see, don't we, is that when we remove meaning and significance and purpose from our lives and from the public kind of theatre, what we're left with is almost this creeping sense of suspicion, don't we, around truth claims, around any kind of truth claim. Like, why would I want this if what this has led to is just this sense of just alienation, and it's let me down. Who can I trust? And so it's also quite a personal thing, as well as if you want to put it, with a big T, truth thing. It's a personal thing too. And I think into that kind of weariness and apathy and pain comes a real opportunity for us as those who follow Jesus to show others that knowing him and being known by him isn't about, assenting to a list of things that we believe to be true about life, the universe, and everything. That's part of it. We get that. But we kind of are able to show them that truth is about so much more than that. It's being known by truth himself, who walks into our lives and says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you come to me, you know the Father, I'm the only way. And in that way, I think we're able to kind of demonstrate something that is lacking, not only in this kind of cultural moment, but I think something that we've seen since Adam and Eve have walked away from the very start.
Right. You said something really interesting in the evening at Oak Hill. You said that coming to know the truth is making friends with reality, which is just a brilliant phrase, making friends with reality. And you say later, and I think you're quoting Esther Meeks at that point, that reality is person-like. And I guess, ultimate truth is personal. How would you like introduce perhaps a non-Christian friends to that idea that actually what they're looking for is not truth in the abstracts, but that actually they're searching after truth is a quite personal thing. They need to make friends with reality. How would you point someone to the fact that reality is person-like and Christ is the heart of it?
I think this is where clues come into it, don't they? And I think there are two ways we can think about clues. Clues are usually things that the purpose of the clue exists beyond itself. The clue is pointing to something else. So if you think about Sherlock Holmes and the times when he walks onto a crime scene and he sees there's a body on the floor, there's a huge rock beside the body, the clock is kind of struck 12, there's a ring on the floor, and there's some paper over here, and he's kind of left to work out, what does all this mean? How do I work out the meaning of this scene? And he looks at these different clues, and there comes a point where he sees that the ring, that's just incidental, it doesn't matter. But there was a moment at which he probably did kind of think about trying to find the owner of the ring and why it was there and who it was. But at the end of it, as he's picked up all these different clues, he works out that the way in which they cohere is thinking that, well, the boulder probably hit this guy, and maybe it smashed the clock on the way down, and that's why it's stuck at 12, which was the time of this person's death. And in a similar way, this is how I think we can look at pointing others to Jesus, and seeing that the things that exist in creation and reality point to something else. They have a purpose outside of themselves as well as within themselves. And so I think in that way they have there's a dual purpose to them. They both lead and they draw. So they lead in the sense that it's a map. They give us a bit of a map to think, okay, well, I see beauty in creation. Oh, I see love. The amount of my friends, number of my friends who at the birth of their first child just suddenly thought, whoa, I'm part of something so much bigger, and this life just seems to be so meaningful, and I don't know how. Why am I overcome with this emotion? We think about love, and we think about art and music and all these different things, and they're leading us, they're pointing somewhere else, but they're also intentionally there to draw us too. So in that sense, it's not only a map, it's also a love song in that way, that it's that tune of a song, of a distant land that we haven't yet heard. And when you hear it, it's like somebody's calling your name, like calling you home. And so I think that's a great way in which we can introduce Jesus as the clue, the one who is the map, and the one who is love himself, who is both leading and drawing us to him.
So those are some of the clues. You've got sort of love, beauty, this sense of meaning. How would you do that in like conversation? Like, what are you doing with your friends? What kind of things are you saying to your friends that lead you into that kind of rich area of conversation that can talk about these clues?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that takes time, doesn't it? Like there isn't a quick kind of answer to that in some ways, because you really have to walk a little bit in somebody else's shoes to know what makes them smile and what makes them cry. And I think one of the questions that I sometimes ask my friends is, what's keeping you awake at night at the moment? What is it? And that often, I think, kind of is an opportunity for them to share either that, that love, whatever it is that they're just thinking about all the time, and that they're searching for or longing for, and also it's an opportunity to expose that deep sense of sadness. Like, what are they worrying about? What is it that's keeping them literally awake at night, for fear or for anxiety or for worry?
Wow. I do something similar we've mentioned 3-2-1. And 3-2-1, I guess, has 4 movements, because it's Jesus and then his view of God and the world and you. And that kind of gives me 4 ways in of having these richer conversations. And with the Jesus, I start thinking about, what gets you thinking? Have you ever had a religious experience? Would you point to any aspects in your life, like when you hold your firstborn child or something like that? So what gets you thinking? And then what gets you up, which is like, what gets you up in the morning? What do you live for? What gets you down is the sort of the world part of things, where we look at this Adam-like world, we experience this Adam-like flesh, and it gets us down. What gets you down? And then what gets you through? That sort of final question, how do you get through the tough times in life? And I guess at that point, people are really talking about their ultimate trust at that stage, I guess you'd say.
That's so good. Yeah, those questions are so good. They do exactly that, don't they? They do point to what is it that we're living for, and what is it that we're worried might kill us in some ways.
Right. Yeah. So you've written this book, More Truth. What do you hope people get out of More Truth?
Well, I think, yeah, okay. So it has quite I think it's applicable for everyone, but it also has quite a kind of like a narrow vision for it, which is to kind of help people who are kind of who kind of came to Jesus, came to the church, and after a while just felt like, you know what, the world just looks so much more beautiful to me right now. And particularly in light of these huge questions like truth, how do I know what is true? Even just reading the papers today, or as you're looking on Twitter or wherever you get your news, you see all sorts of things that are just falling out in the public kind of political square. And again, you're left thinking, gosh, are there any good leaders left? How on earth am I going to think about this huge question, what is truth? And so I think there was a time, and I think that it's still there, when there are quite a few people who are just leaving the church thinking, okay, well, obviously I don't have answers here. I tried Jesus for a bit, it kind of felt good for a while, but then he just didn't work for me anymore. So I'm walking away. And so I think that book in particular is for people like that, who are thinking, well, I'd love to think more about how do I know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, but I don't have time to read like a huge, like stonking book on it. So it's meant to be like a short, sharp thing to help people think about like a history of truth, and then think about what does Jesus mean when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and what hope does that give us? So it's addressing some of those questions about truth and trust, and where does suspicion come from, and how does that fuel kind of our dissatisfaction, and what does it look like for Jesus to, again, just to walk into our hearts and say, no, come, follow me, all those who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. And particularly in this question.
Brilliant. And it does point people to the person who is truth as well, which is great. So thank you so much for writing it. Kristi, how can people keep up with your work online?
Oh, that's so kind. You know what? I actually have absolutely no idea how you can do that. I don't have any formal way of
podcast, don't you, as well? Come on.
Yeah,
don't we all?
Yeah. I mean, there's a joint podcast with my friend Andy Bannister of Solar. So if you'd like to tune into that, please do. If you'd like to receive my personal prayer letter, it's mainly for my friends, but it's an opportunity just to hear what I'm up to and which missions I'm speaking at and stuff like that, and what's on my heart. If you'd love to pray,